The first time I realized something was wrong, it was already too late. I turned onto my gravel road like I had 1,000 times before, coffee in one hand, window cracked just enough to let the cold morning air hit my face. That road had been mine for years, cracked, dusty, familiar. But that morning, it wasn't mine anymore. There was a fence, a brand-new, steel-gray fence stretching across the entrance. No warning, no notice, just cold, welded metal and a bright white sign nailed to the center. Private road, HOA members only. I laughed at first. A real laugh. The kind you make when something is so ridiculous you assume it has to be a prank. But then I saw the lock. A thick chain lock that hadn't been there the night before. I stepped out of my truck and walked closer, gravel crunching under my boots, heart thundering in my chest. I ran my hand over the metal, still cool from the night air. Whoever put this up hadn't just crossed a line. They'd crossed the wrong person. Because that road, that land, that entrance, it wasn't just near my property. It was my property. And the name behind the HOA on that little white sign, I recognized it instantly. I'd signed the papers myself years ago. The truth hit me like a punch to the chest. They weren't trying to keep strangers out. They were trying to force me in. And that fence? That wasn't just metal. That was a declaration of war. Continuing Section 1, full story flow. I stood there longer than I'd like to admit, staring at the fence like it might explain itself if I glared hard enough. It didn't. It just sat there, smug and silent, a barrier that had no legal right to exist. I drove the long way around to my house, through a rough, muddy service path that only I ever used, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, my calm was gone. Sitting in my mailbox was a thick, cream-colored envelope. No postage, no return address, just my name. Inside, I found a neatly typed letter. Dear property owner, your land has been included in the newly formed Whispering Pines Community Association. Membership is mandatory. Annual dues, $5,000. My hands tightened around the paper. Mandatory. They hadn't asked. They had decided. And apparently, they assumed I'd roll over and accept it. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that the land they'd just claimed, it wasn't just a piece of dirt to me. It was my father's legacy, my escape from city life, my peace, and I wasn't about to let a group of strangers with matching mailboxes take it away. That's when I decided I wouldn't just fight them. I'd let them think they were winning. For now, the meeting notice showed up 3 days later. Not in the mail, not by email. It was taped to my fence. I almost laughed when I saw it, flapping in the wind like a challenge instead of an invitation. Mandatory HOA orientation, attendance required location, Whispering Pines Community Clubhouse time, 7 p.m. Attendance required. The words sat there in bold, neat lettering like they were talking to a tenant, not an owner. So I went, not because I was scared, not because I felt ordered, but because I wanted to see their faces. The clubhouse was nothing more than an oversized cabin with stone columns and soft yellow lighting spilling through the windows. The parking lot was full of polished SUVs and sedans that looked like they'd never seen a dirt road. I parked my old truck at the far end and walked in. Every head turned. That's when I realized something else was wrong. They weren't expecting me. Not really. They expected someone nervous, someone confused, maybe even apologetic. Instead, they got me. Inside, a long folding table faced rows of perfectly arranged metal chairs, bottled waters, printed packets, matching pens with the HOA's Little Tree logo printed on the side. At the front stood a woman in a tight blazer and forced smile. "Welcome," she said, her eyes sliding over me before lingering just a second too long. "I'm Pamela Greer, president of the Whispering Pines Community Association." She said it like it was supposed to impress me. I didn't blink. She launched into a presentation that felt more like a sermon. Rules about fences, rules about mailboxes, rules about approved paint colors, rules about grass height. Then came the real part. Upon inclusion into the community association, Pamela said, flipping through a binder, all property owners will be responsible for standard annual dues, special assessments, and community compliance fees. Someone in the back raised a hand. "How much?" She smiled again. $5,000 per year. A few quiet gasps. Some nods. I raised my hand slowly. Yes, she said, hesitating. I stood up. Show me the document where I agreed to that. Silence. You could hear the air conditioner running. Pamela cleared her throat. Membership for your parcel was drafted based on development expansion. In English, I said calmly, you have nothing with my signature on it. Her jaw tightened just slightly. We don't require individual consent for community consistency, she said. That's when the room shifted. People looked uncomfortable. They didn't sign up for this kind of meeting. After the presentation, she cornered me near the coffee table. You're being difficult, she said quietly. No, I said. You're being illegal. Her smile dropped. Your road is inside our planned boundary, she said. We already installed the gate. You built it on my land. She leaned in, voice low. You'll find it's easier to cooperate than to resist. There it was. Not a request. A threat. The next morning, things escalated. When I went to leave for town, my truck was boxed in. Not by police. Not by construction. By cones. Bright orange traffic cones placed in a perfect semicircle behind my tires. Another white sign had been zip-tied to my fence. Access restricted. Unauthorized vehicle. I stood there for a full minute, staring in disbelief. They hadn't just blocked my road. They were testing me, trying to see how far they could push before I snapped. Instead of moving the cones, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Day 1. I said quietly to the camera, HOA interference. No paperwork. No court order. I stepped over the cones and kicked one aside. It bounced and rolled. The sound echoed louder than it should have, because now it wasn't just about inconvenience. It was about control. By afternoon, a second letter arrived. This one was bolder, thicker, certified. Final notice of compliance. You have 14 days to complete mandatory HOA registration and pay assessed dues. Failure to comply will result in liens, fines, and restricted property access. 14 days. They thought time was on their side. They thought pressure would scare me. What they didn't know, I'd already made a call. Not to a lawyer. Not yet. To someone who knew exactly how ugly things like this could get. My old friend, a county surveyor named Mark. And when he answered, all I said was, someone just tried to steal my land. There was a pause. Then he said, send me the coordinates. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my porch, staring at the shadow of the new fence in the distance, and I realized something dangerous. They weren't just trying to collect dues. They were trying to erase me. Mark showed up before sunrise. That alone told me how serious this was. He pulled into my driveway in an old county truck with faded decals and a long antenna vibrating gently in the morning breeze. He didn't even shut the door before stepping out. Where's the fence? He asked. I didn't bother explaining. I just walked him toward the road. The morning fog hadn't lifted yet when we reached it. The new metal gate sat there like it owned the world, chain tight, lock shiny, sign still screaming private HOA road like it was fact instead of fiction. Mark stood quietly for a long moment. Then he pulled a folded set of maps from the back of his truck. Real maps, county ones, with seals. We spread them across the hood of my truck and held them down with coffee cups. He pointed with a thick finger. Your parcel starts here, he said, and ends here. His finger traced a line. The fence sat 10 feet inside it. Not borderline, not confusing. Inside, clear as day. Someone screwed up bad, he muttered. No, I said. Someone did it on purpose. He set up his equipment like he'd done it 1,000 times. Tripods, bright yellow measuring poles, GPS receiver blinking like a slow heartbeat. We spent the next hour walking the property edge. Click, measure, mark, repeat. Each metal stake he hammered into the ground felt like a small act of rebellion. This is going to get ugly, he said finally. I'm counting on it. By noon, we had proof, hard proof, coordinates, measurements, photos. He printed me a temporary survey report right there from his truck. Unofficial, he said, handing it to me, but accurate. I looked at the document. The numbers didn't just show ownership. They showed intent. The HOA fence wasn't a mistake. It was strategically placed. They weren't blocking the road randomly. They were slowly inching into my property, testing boundaries, creating new lines. If I'd paid and joined, they would have eventually owned it outright. That afternoon, I decided to test something. I posted bright red private property signs of my own, right over their white HOA ones. I didn't rip theirs down, didn't touch their fence. I just covered their lies with my truth. It felt good. That's when the SUV showed up. Black, polished, tinted windows. It rolled to a stop just beyond the fence. The driver's door opened slowly. Pamela. She didn't walk over like a neighbor. She walked over like a prosecutor. Her heels clicked with every step. "You can't place those signs," she said. "I already did." I replied, "This land is under community jurisdiction." I held up the paper Mark gave me. "County coordinates disagree." She didn't look at the paper, didn't care. She smiled instead, and that smile was colder than the chain on the fence. "You're very confident for someone standing alone." That's when the second vehicle arrived, and the third, 3 more SUVs. They lined the road like a silent warning. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Not workers, not neighbors, lawyers. You could tell by their suits, their posture, their eyes. Pamela folded her arms. "You have 2 choices," she said. "Join us and make this easy, or let us make it hard." Mark stepped forward beside me. "You're 10 feet over," he said calmly. She glanced at him like he was dust. "You surveyors are always behind," she said. "We're just ahead." That night, I got my first fine. Not mailed, not emailed. Slid under my door. $1,500. Signage violation. I stared at the paper for almost an hour. Then I laughed, because now I understood something important. They weren't bluffing, and neither was I. I called Mark again. "I'm going to need more than a friend with a ruler," I said. There was a pause. Then, "I know a woman." That got my attention. "She used to expose land grab cases for the state," he said. "Retired, quiet, dangerous smart." "What's her name?" He said it once. I repeated it like a promise. I sat on my porch again that night. But this time, I wasn't scared of the fence. I was excited, because they'd made their biggest mistake already. They assumed I was just a landowner. They had no idea I was about to become a problem. I didn't expect her to be ordinary. That's the only word I can find. When Mark told me about her, I imagined someone loud and dramatic, a courtroom nightmare wrapped in legal pads and fury. Instead, she was quiet. Silver hair pulled into a low knot. Simple coat. Soft eyes that didn't miss anything. Her name was Evelyn Cross. She arrived 2 mornings later in a dull gray sedan and stepped out with the calm of someone who'd seen this type of war before. I shook her hand. She held it a second longer than normal. "Show me," she said. No drama. No lectures. Just business. We walked the property line while the morning sun burned away the fog. She didn't carry expensive equipment. She carried a notebook, and she watched. That's when I understood something. She wasn't measuring the land. She was watching behavior. "How long has the fence been here?" she asked. 3 days. "And they're already issuing fines." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Too fast," she said. "That means this was decided months ago." She asked about the meeting, the letters, the threats. She didn't react. She listened. Then she crouched beside one of Mark's metal stakes and brushed dirt away like she was uncovering bones. "You're not the target," she said. My stomach tightened. "Then who is?" "You're in the way," she replied. "Big difference." She spent the rest of the day making phone calls from my porch. Quiet ones, hard ones, the kind where she didn't raise her voice, but the air felt heavier afterward. By evening, she had a file. Not a physical one, a mental one. "You're not dealing with an HOA," she said, finally sitting across from me. "You're dealing with a real estate funnel." She leaned forward. "They create HOAs to redraw unofficial property boundaries, pressure people to join, Take small amounts at first, then use liens and fines to absorb land legally. I felt the words hit somewhere behind my eyes. They've done this before. I asked. She nodded. Twice that I proved, she said, and 5 more that got buried. The next morning, they escalated. Again, I woke up to the sound of engines. Not cars, heavy ones, excavators. 2 of them sat near the fence line, their arms resting like metal insects waiting to strike. Bright survey flags fluttered in the wind. But they weren't county flags. They were private. Contractor flags. Evelyn stood beside me. They are trying to make it look official, she said. The first scoop of dirt hit the ground like a gunshot. I stepped forward. Evelyn touched my arm. Don't, she said. Let them. I turned to her. Let them dig my land. She nodded. Let them build their case wrong. Before noon, I had another notice. This one was heavier. Embossed. Stamped. Notice of encroachment and correction. They were accusing me now, claiming I had crossed into their community boundary. Gaslighting me. On paper. Evelyn read it without blinking. Good, she said. I stared at her. You're smiling. Why? Because now it's documented. By afternoon, something changed. The black SUVs returned. But this time, no speeches, no threats, just filming. Cameras pointed at the excavators, at my house, at me. Pamela didn't speak. She just watched. And that scared me more than anything she'd said before. Evelyn leaned close. They are preparing for court, she whispered, which means they think they are untouchable. Are they? She looked at me, and for the first time, smiled like she meant it. No. That night, Evelyn showed me what she'd really been doing. Not just watching. Not just listening. She slid her tablet across the table. Rows of names. Addresses. Court filings. HOAs with different names. Different states. Same board members. Same legal team. Same patterns. I scrolled slowly. This wasn't local. This was a system. These people don't just mess with one man's land, she said quietly. They harvest land. That word stuck in my chest. Harvest. Like crops. Like resources. Like people didn't matter. When I went to bed that night, I felt something different. Not fear. Not anger. Clarity. They weren't bigger than me. They were just louder. And thanks to Evelyn, they were about to get exposed. Evelyn didn't believe in shouting matches. She believed in paperwork. Power doesn't live in fences, she told me one morning as we sat at my kitchen table. It lives in documents people don't read. That was the day we stopped reacting and started setting the trap. The first move was silence. No more phone calls. No more arguments at the fence. No more signs. We let the excavators sit there, let their cameras roll, let Pamela and her legal team think they'd broken me. Compliance, on the surface, is a powerful illusion, and we gave them exactly what they wanted to see. 3 days later, I received another official-looking envelope. Final opportunity to cooperate. This one wasn't threatening. It was polite. Smiling language. Friendly tone. An invitation to sign. They included a full HOA membership packet. By design, Evelyn held it with 2 fingers like it was radioactive. They want you to sign this, she said, so they can prove consent. And if I don't, they'll force you anyway through fines and liens, she said. But if you do, they lock themselves into documented fraud. That's when I understood. This wasn't about refusing. This was about letting them expose themselves. So I signed. Not blindly. Not stupidly. I signed with conditions. Fine print. Dates. Photocopies. Receive under protest written cleanly at the bottom of every page. Evelyn watched silently. When I finished, she nodded once. Perfect. We sent the packet back. Certified. Tracked. Copied. We created a trail so loud it could be followed from space. The reaction was immediate. 2 days later, the cones were gone. The gate unlocked. The signs removed. They thought they'd won. That agreement was their victory flag. They had no idea it was a noose. That same afternoon, Evelyn made one last call. Not to a lawyer, not to the county, to the state, a specific department, a quiet one, people who didn't knock first. The meeting invite arrived the next week. HOA board special session, mandatory attendance. This time, it wasn't taped. It was delivered by hand. The clubhouse parking lot was packed when I arrived. More SUVs, different faces, higher stakes. I walked in like I belonged there, because now, on paper, they said I did. Pamela smiled when she saw me. That fake, polished victory smile. So glad you decided to cooperate, she said. I smiled back. I love being part of things. She had no idea. The meeting started with charts, budgets, expansion plans, proposed community improvements. But Evelyn had warned me. Only one document mattered. The annexation page. The page that showed how they absorbed land. The page that proved everything. Pamela held it like a trophy. New parcels incorporated, she said proudly. This brings valuable acreage under our protection. I raised my hand. Yes, she said. Can you explain how my land became part of this protection without my original consent? She paused, just a fraction of a second too long. Well, she said, glancing at the legal team, we now have your signed agreement. That's when Evelyn stood up. She hadn't been sitting with me. She'd been sitting in the back, quiet, invisible. She walked forward slowly. I'm very glad you do, she said. Pamela blinked. Who are you? Evelyn reached into her coat, pulled out a badge. Not police. Worse, oversight. The kind of authority that didn't make noise, it made disappearances. She placed it down on the table. Because that document makes this a state-level fraud investigation. Silence. Pure. Heavy. Dead. The lawyer stood up. Everyone did. Not to shout. To leave. Pamela stayed seated. She didn't move. Her face didn't crack. But her hand shook. I saw it. Finally, that night, I sat on my porch again. The fence still stood. The dirt still torn. But for the first time, they were the ones waiting. Not me. We weren't done. Not even close. The raid didn't happen with sirens. No flashing lights. No shouting. It happened like the air itself had changed. One morning, 2 black sedans rolled quietly down the road that used to be blocked. No HOA signs. No cones. No fake authority. Just men and women in plain clothes carrying slim folders in quiet confidence. They walked straight past the fence. No one stopped them. Pamela didn't show up that day. Neither did the lawyers. The excavators sat abandoned. The clubhouse parking lot was empty. That silence, that was fear. Evelyn stood beside me again, hands in her coat. It started, she said. I nodded. I didn't feel victory. I felt relief. Over the next 2 weeks, everything unraveled. The HOA's authority vanished overnight. Recorded meetings disappeared from the website. The tree logo pens vanished. Letters stopped coming. What replaced them? Subpoenas. Official letters with state seals. Not to me. To them. Neighbors started talking. Because suddenly, the board members' houses were for sale. Fast. Cheap. One of the black SUVs showed up at my gate again. This time, it didn't stop. It drove through. Because I cut the lock myself that morning. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. A man in a gray suit arrived on the 3rd week. No SUV. No entourage. He parked politely at my driveway and stepped out alone. He held out his hand. Mr. Hale, he said. I blinked. I'd never told anyone my real last name. Not out loud. Not in paperwork. Evelyn shifted slightly beside me. That means this isn't small anymore, she said quietly. The man nodded. Correct. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't pretend. We're correcting a number of land records that were influenced, he said carefully. He handed me a folder. Inside was my property map, but older, original, not the altered county copy. This, he said, tapping it gently, is what you've always owned. I felt something go tight in my chest. Not anger, not fear, recognition. 2 days later, a crew showed up. Not HOA, not contractors. County, real ones. They arrived with official trucks and real badges. They pulled the fence down. Not carefully, not gently. They cut it like it was never allowed to exist. The sound of grinding metal was louder than any argument I'd had, and when it fell, it sounded final. Pamela called me that night, from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Was this all really necessary? She asked. Her voice wasn't powerful anymore. It was thin, tired, human. I thought about my father's land, the road, the fence, the threats, the signatures, the gaslighting. The only mistake I made, I said, was thinking you were small. Silence hung on the line. Then the call ended. The Whispering Pine Community Association didn't restructure. It didn't apologize. It didn't survive. It was dissolved, wiped. Every fine I'd been sent, voided. The mandatory membership, declared fraudulent. The land they tried to harvest, returned. All of it. A month later, I got one last letter. No logo, no threats, just clean, honest paper. Notice of boundary confirmation. Stamped, signed, final. Evelyn stood with me at the property line the day the last stake was removed. You're safe now, she said. I looked at the open road, the real road, the one that had always been mine. They thought they were taking something small, I said. She nodded. They always do. That evening, I sat on my porch again. But this time, there was no fence in the distance. No shadows. No warnings. Just open land and quiet air. And the understanding that they hadn't messed with the victim. They'd messed with the owner.